Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back in time, way back, to a Japan that feels almost mythical now. Imagine mist hanging low over ancient forests, the distant clang of steel, and the quiet hum of a world where life was cheap and honor was everything. We're going to walk in the sandals of a true legend, a figure whose name echoes through history, synonymous with mastery and solitude. We're going to explore your life as Miyamoto Musashi. It's a journey filled with duels, philosophy, and maybe a few more close calls than your average Tuesday. Fair warning, you probably won't survive your teenage years in this story without picking up a few scars. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story begins shrouded in a fog thicker than any morning mist over the bamboo groves of Harima province. You don't get a grand entrance, no celestial signs or prophecies foretelling your future greatness. Instead, your birth is a question mark, a historical puzzle piece that scholars still argue over. Was it 1584? Maybe a couple of years earlier, in 1582? The records are hazy, conflicting, lost to time and the tumultuous era you were born into. You arrive in a world teetering on the edge, the Sengoku period, Japan's age of warring states, a time when stability was a distant dream and violence was a daily reality. Your birthplace is usually cited as Miyamoto Village in Harima, a quiet corner of what is now Hyogo Prefecture. It's a place of rolling hills, fertile plains near the coast, and mountains inland. Not exactly the center of the universe, which perhaps suits the solitary path you're destined to walk. And who was your father? Even that isn't completely clear. The most widely accepted account points to Shinmen Munisai, a skilled martial artist himself, known for his juddy technique. That's like a short iron truncheon, good for parrying swords. Think of it as the ancient Japanese equivalent of a police baton, but way cooler. He was a retainer of the powerful Shinmen clan, hence your later adoption of the name Miyamoto Shinmen Musashi. Munisai was apparently quite the character, maybe a bit difficult, even challenging the head of the Yoshioka school in Kyoto at one point. Foreshadowing much? But historians still argue whether Munisai was your biological father, or if you were adopted, perhaps from a family named Hirata. Some theories suggest Munisai might have been too old, or that the timing doesn't quite line up. It adds to the mystery, doesn't it? You, the legendary swordsman, don't even have a clear birth certificate. It's like trying to prove you were born in the 80s based purely on your questionable fashion choices. Growing up in Harima during the late 16th century meant a life far removed from the refined courts of Kyoto or the bustling ports. It was a world of farmers, local samurai, and the constant undercurrent of warfare. You would have seen the effects of conflict firsthand, perhaps soldiers marching through your village, the fear in people's eyes, the uncertainty of who was in control from one season to the next. This wasn't a childhood filled with structured lessons in etiquette or poetry. It was a practical, often harsh upbringing. You learned about the land, about survival, about watching people and assessing situations. The smell of damp earth after rain, the sight of rice paddies stretching to the horizon, the feel of rough spun cloth against your skin, these were your early sensory inputs. If Munisai was your father, you likely got your first exposure to martial arts from him. Not in a fancy dojo, probably more like practicing in a dusty yard, using wooden sticks that felt heavy and awkward in your small hands. Munisai was apparently a master of the juddy and a proficient swordsman. He served the Shinmen clan, who were involved in the regional conflicts. So, you weren't just learning techniques, you were absorbing the mindset of a warrior, the importance of discipline, and perhaps the frustration of serving masters who might fall in battle. Some accounts say you were a difficult child, headstrong and independent, not one for sitting still or following rules just because someone told you to. This early trait of following your own path, even if it meant rubbing people the wrong way, seems to have been hardwired in you from the start. There's a quirky tidbit that suggests your father, Munisai, was awarded the title Best in Japan for his juddy skills by none other than Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki. Imagine your dad getting a trophy saying, Best stick fighter in the country. It's a small detail, but it shows you came from a lineage with some serious martial pedigree, even if your own style would eventually diverge wildly from tradition. It's like growing up in a family of classical musicians and deciding you're going to invent jazz. Life in Harima wasn't easy. You might have been raised partly by an uncle, perhaps a monk named Doran, adding another layer to the complex picture of your early years. This period of your life is like trying to piece together an old photo album where half the pictures are missing or blurry. You know the setting, rural Japan, late 1500s. You know the feeling, a sense of being slightly outside the norm, perhaps a bit wild, certainly independent. You were learning to rely on yourself, observing the world with sharp, critical eyes. The uncertainty of your birth, the potentially absent or difficult father, the turbulent times, it all brewed together to forge a personality that didn't fit neatly into the established samurai hierarchy. You weren't born into a prestigious family with a clear path laid out. You had to carve your own. You spent your days exploring the countryside, maybe practicing with whatever you could find, a fallen branch, a piece of bamboo. You weren't just playing, you were developing an intuitive understanding of distance, timing, and balance. The world around you was your training ground. The rustling leaves in the wind, the way a river flowed, the movement of animals, you were soaking it all in, perhaps without even realizing how it would later inform your unique approach to combat. It's like kids today learning complex physics by playing video games, only your game had much higher stakes and fewer respawn points. This solitary, unconventional upbringing in Harima, away from the formal dojos and strict lineages, was crucial. It allowed you to develop your own style, unburdened by tradition. You weren't taught a way, you were developing your way. This independence, born out of necessity and perhaps a bit of natural stubbornness, is what would define you. You were a product of your environment, a wild seed planted in fertile, yet dangerous, ground. And that seed was about to sprout, violently, in your very first duel. Your solitary, unconventional upbringing in Harima, away from the formal dojos and strict lineages, was crucial. It allowed you to develop your own style, unburdened by tradition. You weren't taught a way, you were developing your way. This independence, born out of necessity and perhaps a bit of natural stubbornness, is what would define you. You were a product of your environment, a wild seed planted in fertile, yet dangerous, ground. And that seed was about to sprout, violently, in your very first duel. You are 13 years old. Not exactly prime dueling age in most societies, unless you're involved in a particularly brutal game of dodgeball. But this is Sengoku Japan, remember? 13 here is practically middle-aged when it comes to facing mortality. Word reaches your village, or perhaps the nearby area where you're staying, about a samurai named Arima Kihei. He's a retainer of the Ikeda clan, attached to the Shirayukaji temple complex. More importantly for your story, he's apparently looking for a challenge. He's posted a public challenge, a Hyoshi, basically bragging about his skills and inviting anyone to fight him. Arima Kihei is described as a master of the tachi, a long sword, and the jutty, that parrying truncheon your potential father, Munisai, was famous for. He sounds like a big deal, at least to the local populace. And you, a scrawny, perhaps slightly feral 13-year-old, decide this is your moment. Why? Maybe it's that innate stubbornness, that need to test yourself against the world. Maybe you've heard about Arima Kihei's reputation and feel a pull to measure your unconventional training against a recognized master. Or maybe, just maybe, he said something particularly annoying on his challenge post, like claiming he could beat anyone with one hand tied behind his back, and your teenage brain just couldn't let that slide. Historians still argue about the precise location and date of this duel, with some traditions placing it in the Misaka province, near your mother's potential family home, rather than Harima. But the core event remains consistent. A young, unknown you challenges an established warrior. You find Arima Kihei at the appointed place, likely a field or open area near the temple. He probably takes one look at you, this gangly kid with maybe a wooden sword or a dull practice blade, and laughs. A seasoned samurai, perhaps in his late 20s or 30s, clad in some level of armor, facing a teenager. It must have felt like a formality to him, maybe a chance to show off. He might have expected you to back down, or perhaps intended to just lightly spar and teach you a lesson in humility. Poor guy had no idea the kind of lesson he was about to receive. The tension in the air would have been thick. Not the kind you feel before a job interview, but the kind where life is on the line. The smell of damp earth, the distant buzz of insects, the weight of the weapon in your hand, it all sharpens your focus. Arima Kihei advances, likely with the confidence of experience. He knows the traditional forms, the proper stances, the expected attacks. He's probably expecting you to follow the script, to engage in the standard exchanges taught in dojos. But you don't do standard. You never have. Instead of meeting his initial move with a block or a parry according to established technique, you rush him. It's not elegant, it's brutal and direct. You charge forward, overwhelming him with unexpected speed and ferocity. He's probably momentarily stunned by this complete disregard for protocol. You knock him down, perhaps with a blow to the head or body. Accounts differ slightly here, but the outcome is clear: you don't give him a chance to recover. While he's on the ground, before he can regain his footing or bring his weapon to bear effectively, you strike him again. The blow is fatal. It's quick, messy, and absolutely decisive. Imagine the shock. The onlookers, if there were any, would have been stunned into silence. A 13-year-old kid has just killed a respected samurai. It wasn't a display of refined technique. It was a raw, instinctive act of violence that exploited an opening created by surprise and aggression. It was less like a choreographed sword fight and more like a really intense, slightly terrifying game of tag where it means you're dead. This wasn't a duel. It was an execution born of youthful audacity and a complete lack of respect for the established pecking order. This first kill, at such a young age, is a defining moment. It shatters any remaining innocence you might have held onto. You've taken a life. You've proven that your unconventional, self-taught methods, combined with sheer courage, or perhaps youthful recklessness, can defeat formal training. It validates the path you've been on, the path of relying on your own instincts and observations rather than inherited knowledge. It also marks you. You are no longer just a kid from Harima. You are a killer, a swordsman who has tasted victory in the most brutal way possible. There's a quirky detail in some retellings that Arima Kihei might have been armed with both a sword and a jutty, and that your initial attack somehow disarmed him or incapacitated him before you finished the job. This highlights the potential mismatch in weapons or readiness, further emphasizing that your victory wasn't a fair fight in the traditional sense, but a sudden, violent ambush. It wasn't about proving your skill within the rules. It was about winning, utterly and completely. This kind of pragmatic, result-oriented thinking, even at 13, sets the stage for your later philosophy. Why fight fair when fighting dirty gets the job done? It's like showing up to a chess tournament and just flipping the board over, unconventional, definitely frowned upon, but undeniably effective at ending the game quickly. The aftermath of this duel isn't a celebration. You've killed a samurai who served a local lord. While it was a legitimate challenge, the circumstances, your age, your lack of formal status, the abruptness of the fight, likely made staying around unwise. You probably had to leave the area quickly, perhaps returning to the care of your uncle or simply disappearing into the countryside. This first duel forces you into a life of wandering, of being on the run, of relying solely on your own wits, and your developing skills with a blade. You can't go back to being just a kid anymore. The blood of Arima Kihei is on your hands, and it has set your feet on a path that leads away from home, into the wider, more dangerous world of Sengoku Japan. This victory, while brutal and unorthodox, solidifies your confidence. You learn that speed, surprise, and a willingness to break the rules can overcome superior training and experience. You also learn that killing is a serious business, but perhaps not one to be overly sentimental about if you intend to survive. It's a harsh lesson delivered swiftly on a field near a temple. The quiet life you might have had is now impossible. You are now known, at least locally, as the terrifying child who killed Arima Kihei. And that reputation, that notoriety, will follow you, and grow, as you embark on the next phase of your life, the relentless pursuit of mastery through combat. After that brutal, shocking victory at 13, the quiet fields of Harima or Mimasaka couldn't hold you. You were a killer now, a wanderer by necessity. The years that followed the Arema Kihei duel are another hazy period, a blur of roads traveled, villages seen, and likely more encounters that honed your skills in the harshest possible way. You weren't attending a prestigious fencing academy. Your dojo was the open road, your instructors were the various opponents you faced, whether in formal duels or less structured, more desperate fights for survival. You were absorbing lessons from the world itself, the posture of someone about to attack, the best angle to approach uneven ground, the way light and shadow could conceal or reveal. This was real-world training, far removed from the kata and traditions practiced behind closed dojo doors. You were developing your style, not just inheriting one. While others practiced elaborate forms, perfecting techniques passed down through generations, you were focused on one thing: winning, quickly and decisively. You learned to read your opponent, not just their stance, but their intention, their fear, their overconfidence. You probably looked like hell most of the time, dusty, maybe a bit wild-eyed, certainly not the image of a polished samurai. You were a ronin, a wave man, drifting wherever the road took you, surviving on wits and the edge of your blade. Think of it like getting your martial arts degree through a series of increasingly dangerous street fights instead of attending college. Much faster, much riskier, definitely not recommended for career advancement. Eventually, your travels bring you to Kyoto. This isn't the rural quiet you grew up with. This is the capital, the heart of Japan, even if the shogunate's power is waning. Kyoto in the late 16th or early 17th century is a vibrant, sprawling city. Temples and shrines, merchant districts, samurai mansions, artisans' workshops. The air would be filled with the smells of incense, cooking food, maybe a touch of sewage. The sounds are a constant hum, carts rumbling, people calling out, distant temple bells, the occasional shout. It's a world away from the rice paddies and forests you know. And it's home to some of the most famous martial arts schools in the country. And you, the unconventional, self-taught wanderer, decide to challenge the most famous of them all, the Yoshioka school. Why the Yoshioka? Because they were the best, or at least, the most renowned. They were the official fencing instructors to the Ashikaga shogun himself. Their style, Kyoryu, capital school, was considered the pinnacle of traditional sword fighting, elegant, refined, steeped in history. Challenging them wasn't just about testing your skill. It was a direct assault on the establishment. A statement that your untamed, pragmatic approach was superior to their polished tradition. It's like a garage band deciding to challenge the biggest, most respected orchestra in the world to a battle of the bands. Audacious doesn't even begin to cover it. You arrive at the Yoshioka dojo, likely a grand, imposing building befitting their status, and make your challenge known. How exactly you did this is part of the legend. Did you post a written challenge? Did you simply walk in and declare your intentions? Given your personality, it was probably direct and lacking in formal etiquette. You weren't there to politely request a lesson, you were there to tear down their reputation. Imagine the scene, you, likely dressed in rough, travel-worn clothes, perhaps with your hair unbound, standing before the polished, well-fed samurai of the Yoshioka school, who probably looked at you like you were something the cat dragged in. The Yoshioka masters, headed by Yoshioka Seijiro, must have been insulted, perhaps even bewildered. Who was this nobody? An unknown ronin, probably barely in his 20s, challenging the lineage that had trained shoguns? Accepting your challenge was a risk. If they refused, it might look like cowardice. If they accepted and won, it was expected, crushing a fly. But if they accepted and lost, that would be unthinkable. Their entire reputation, built over generations, would be shattered by an upstart. Historians still argue about the exact age you were when you challenged the Yoshioka, some placing it closer to 20, others a few years older, but the consensus is you were young, and they were established. Despite the risk, they accept. Perhaps they underestimated you completely. Perhaps they believed their traditional, proven techniques were invincible against an untrained rogue. Or perhaps they saw it as an opportunity to publicly humble you, to make an example of the arrogant young punk who dared to question their authority. Seijiro, the headmaster, agrees to face you first. The stage is set for a duel that will catapult you from relative obscurity into notoriety across Japan. The duel is arranged to take place outside the city, away from the immediate public eye, perhaps near the Renjin Temple in northern Kyoto. This is a serious affair, not a friendly spar. Reputations, and potentially lives, are on the line. Seijiro arrives, undoubtedly accompanied by students and retainers, looking every bit the master of a prestigious school, composed, confident, armed with a fine katana. He expects you to arrive with similar formality, perhaps at the appointed time, ready for a traditional exchange of bows and stances. But you have other plans. You don't show up on time. You arrive late. Intentionally. Maybe you linger nearby, watching, observing. You wait until Seijiro and his retinue have been waiting, growing impatient, perhaps even angry. This isn't just rudeness, it's a calculated move. You are disrupting his focus, making him question if you will even show up, letting his confidence curdle into irritation. You arrive perhaps disheveled, certainly not apologetic. It's a mind game before the swords even cross. You're not just fighting his technique. You're fighting his composure, his expectations, his very sense of order. It's like showing up for a job interview an hour late, wearing sweatpants, and then acing it just to mess with the interviewer. Seijiro, representing the height of traditional sword fighting, is likely furious by the time you arrive. He's a master of the Kyoryu style, known for its elegant, flowing movements and precise cuts. He is probably expecting you to engage in a conventional match, exchanging blows according to established forms. He expects you to be constrained by the rules and expectations of a formal duel. But as you learned from your first duel, you don't play by the rules. You play to win. Your unconventional upbringing, your years of fighting outside the dojo, have taught you that surprise and adaptability are often more effective than rigid form. While Seijiro embodies the perfected technique of generations, you embody raw, untamed effectiveness. The tension between these two approaches, the traditional versus the utterly pragmatic, crackles in the air as you finally face each other. The duel is about to begin, and the Yoshioka school is about to get a very rude awakening. Seijiro, the master of the prestigious Yoshioka school, is probably fuming by the time you finally show up, cool as a cucumber, disrupting his carefully planned performance. He's a master of Kyoryu, a style refined over generations, full of elegant stances and precise movements. He holds his katana with the confidence of someone who has spent a lifetime perfecting his craft. He represents everything you are not: tradition, lineage, established authority. You, on the other hand, represent chaos, instinct, and a complete disregard for how things are supposed to be done. The air crackles with the tension between these two worlds. The duel begins. Seijiro moves with the grace and precision of his school, perhaps initiating with a standard opening move. He expects you to parry, block, or counter according to the established rules of engagement. But you don't. Just like you did with Arema Kihei years ago, you disrupt his expectations immediately. You attack first, not with a formal technique, but with raw, explosive speed. Accounts differ on the specifics. Some say you charged him, others say you struck before he was even ready. A quirky tidbit suggests that Seijiro may have been using a kodachi, a short sword, in this first encounter, perhaps underestimating you and intending to defeat you quickly or even non-fatally with a less serious weapon. If true, it was a fatal miscalculation. You overwhelm him. Your lack of formal training is your strength. You are unpredictable. You don't move like anyone he's ever fought before. You close the distance rapidly, perhaps using a feint or a simple, brutal thrust. The duel is over in moments. You strike him down. Some versions say you broke his arm with a wooden sword, forcing him to concede, while others claim you killed him outright. The most widely accepted account is that you defeated him swiftly, humiliatingly, perhaps leaving him alive but unable to continue, shattering his reputation and leadership of the school in a single, brutal exchange. The crowd, if there was one beyond his students, would have been stunned. The head of the famed Yoshioka school, defeated by an unknown ronin in seconds? It was unthinkable. It was like the reigning world chess champion getting checkmated on the second move by a kid who just learned how the pieces move. The immediate aftermath is a mixture of shock and fury from the Yoshioka side. Their master is defeated. This isn't just a loss, it's an existential threat to their school's honor and future. They cannot let this stand. The duty of vengeance falls to Seijiro's brother, Yoshioka Denshikairo. Denshikairo is said to be a master of not just the sword, but also the bow, a long staff. He is determined to restore his family's honor and avenge his brother's humiliation or death. He issues a formal challenge to you. You accept. The second duel is arranged, this time at a different location, perhaps outside the city again, or near the Senju Zenjindu temple. Denshikairo arrives, likely armed with both his sword and his staff, perhaps intending to use the weapon he feels gives him the greatest advantage against your unorthodox style. He has seen how you defeated his brother. He knows you are fast and unpredictable. He will be wary, perhaps even nervous, despite his skill and desire for revenge. Again, you employ your tactic of psychological warfare. You arrive late. You keep him waiting, letting the tension build, letting his composure fray. You are not just fighting Denshikairo, you are fighting the weight of his family's expectations, the memory of his brother's defeat, and the ticking clock of the waiting period. By the time you finally appear, Denshikairo is likely past impatience and into a cold, brittle rage. The duel commences. Denshikairo, perhaps relying on the reach and power of his staff, or maybe starting with his sword, engages you. He is skilled, a master of his art, but you are not fighting his art, you are fighting him. You are observing, adapting, looking for the slightest opening. Your style isn't about executing perfect forms, it's about efficiency, surprise, and exploiting weakness. You use speed and unconventional angles. Perhaps you dart inside the reach of his staff, making it useless, or you anticipate his sword strokes based on subtle tells in his posture. Again, the duel is swift and decisive. You defeat Denshikairo. Some accounts say you disarmed him and killed him with his own weapon, or with a blow from your wooden sword. The exact method isn't as important as the outcome. Another master of the Yoshioka school, the brother seeking vengeance, is defeated and killed by your hand. 2 brothers down. The unthinkable has happened twice. The foundation of the Yoshioka school is crumbling under the weight of your victories. It's like 2 top-ranked professional boxers from the same family lineage being knocked out in the first round by a street fighter. Their reputation is in tatters. But the Yoshioka lineage isn't completely extinguished yet. The duty, and the desperate need for vengeance, now falls to the youngest son, Yoshioka Marichiro, sometimes called Madahachi, though not the same Madahachi from Yoshikawa's novel. He is young, perhaps still a teenager himself, thrust into the role of defending his family's honor after his older, more experienced brothers have failed. This isn't just about a duel anymore, it's about survival for the Yoshioka school. They know they cannot defeat you in a one-on-one, fair fight based on traditional rules. They have to change the game. Marichiro issues his challenge, and you accept, agreeing to meet at Ichijoji Sagaramatsu, a pine tree on the outskirts of Kyoto famous as a dueling ground. However, you are wary this time. You've defeated 2 masters of the school, you know they are desperate. You suspect a trap. This isn't going to be a simple duel like the previous 2. You arrive at the meeting place well before the appointed time, hiding nearby, observing. And your suspicions are confirmed. Instead of just Marichiro and a second or 2, you see dozens of samurai, Yoshioka students and retainers, lying in wait, armed not just with swords, but with bows and arrows, spears, and other weapons. They intend to ambush you, to overwhelm you with sheer numbers, to assassinate you rather than duel you fairly. It's a blatant violation of the samurai code and the rules of dueling, but for the Yoshioka, honor has taken a back seat to survival and revenge. They are setting a trap for you, the wild card who has dismantled their legacy. It's like agreeing to meet someone for a friendly game of chess and finding they'd brought an entire football team to tackle you before you even make your first move. You are outnumbered perhaps 50 or 60 to 1. This isn't a duel, it's a pitched battle against a small army. A mainstream historical fact is that the Yoshioka school was indeed one of the most prominent fencing schools in Kyoto, serving the shogun, and its decline after encounters with Musashi is a key part of your legend. Facing this overwhelming force, escape seems impossible, and fighting head-on is suicide. But you are Musashi. You don't panic. You adapt. Using the element of surprise you gain by arriving early, you burst from your hiding place and charge Marichiro directly. You don't engage the waiting samurai, you focus on the head of the snake. Your speed and ferocity catch the ambushers off guard. They were expecting you to walk into their trap, not launch a lightning assault from the side. You reach Marichiro before the majority of the ambushers can react effectively. You cut him down swiftly, ending the Yoshioka lineage's leadership. Now you face the mob. But their leader is dead, and their plan is in disarray. You don't try to fight them all. You use your surroundings, the terrain, the trees, maybe even the waiting samurai themselves as obstacles, to your advantage. You cut a path through them, fighting only when necessary, using the chaos you've created to make your escape. You are injured, perhaps, but you survive the impossible. Historians still argue about the exact number of samurai involved in the ambush, and whether Marichiro was killed by you or died later from his wounds, adding layers to the legendary nature of this confrontation. What is certain is that you faced a massive force and emerged victorious, or at least alive, while the Yoshioka school was effectively destroyed as a major force. Your victory over the Yoshioka school is monumental. You have taken on the most prestigious, most traditional fencing school in the capital and utterly destroyed its leadership through a series of duels that defied all conventions. You proved that your self-taught, pragmatic, results-oriented approach could overcome generations of refined technique and established reputation. You weren't just a skilled swordsman, you were a force of nature, a disruptive element that shattered the status quo. You arrived in Kyoto an unknown ronin and left as the legendary swordsman who single-handedly brought down the Yoshioka. Your name is now whispered with awe and fear across Japan. But such notoriety comes at a price. You are now a marked man, and your wandering life is far from over. Your victory over the Yoshioka school, or rather, your absolute dismantling of their leadership and reputation in Kyoto, makes you famous. Infamous, perhaps, is a better word. You've proven your skill, but you've also proven you operate outside the established rules, a dangerous combination in a society built on hierarchy and tradition. You are the ronin who took on the shogun's fencing masters and won. Everyone knows your name now, but not everyone is a fan. The authorities are likely looking for you, the remnants of the Yoshioka school certainly are, and countless other sword schools are probably itching to test this upstart who thinks he's better than everyone else. Your life as a wandering swordsman just got a lot more complicated, and a lot more dangerous. You have a target on your back the size of Kyoto itself. But the small-scale world of personal duels and school rivalries is about to be swallowed by a much, much larger conflict. While you're carving your name into legend with your sword, the entire country is holding its breath. The great unifier, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, is dead, and the fragile peace he created is fracturing. Two massive power blocks are forming, led by two titans, Tokugawa Ieyasu in the east, and Ishida Mitsunari, ostensibly representing the young heir Hideyori, in the west. Japan is barreling towards a civil war that will decide who rules for the next 250 years. How do you get involved in this? This is where the history gets a little murky, as is often the case with your early life. Historians still argue about your precise movements and affiliations leading up to the Battle of Sekigahara. Did you find service with a lord who happened to side with the Western Army? Were you simply a ronin drifting through the region and swept up in the tide? Some accounts suggest you were part of the forces loyal to the Yukita clan, who fought for the West. Regardless of the specifics, you find yourself on the wrong side of history's most decisive samurai showdown. You, the ultimate individualist, are about to become a tiny, anonymous cog in a massive war machine. It's like being a freelance graphic designer and suddenly finding yourself drafted into a corporate merger where your job is to make sure the staplers are aligned correctly. October 21st, 1600. The place is Sekigahara, a valley in what is now Gifu Prefecture. It's early morning, The air is thick with mist and the tension of over 160,000 warriors facing each other across a few miles of muddy ground. This isn't a duel, this is a collision of armies. The scale is immense, unlike anything you've experienced before. The smell isn't just damp earth, it's sweat, fear, horse manure, and the metallic tang of anticipation. The sound isn't the quiet tension of a dueling ground, it's the rumble of thousands of men, the neighing of horses, the distant shouts of commanders, the nervous clatter of armor. You are just one man among tens of thousands. Your unique style, honed in one-on-one combat, feels almost irrelevant here. This is formation fighting, spear walls, cavalry charges, arrow volleys raining down like deadly rain. Your skill with a sword is still crucial, but survival depends less on outthinking a single opponent and more on not being trampled, not taking an arrow to the face, and hoping the guy next to you doesn't panic and run. You are fighting alongside strangers, against strangers, in a chaotic, confusing landscape. It's less about honor and more about staying alive for the next 5 minutes. The battle begins in earnest when the mist lifts. The Eastern Army, led by Ieyasu, faces the Western Army, commanded by Ishida Mitsunari, but composed of various feudal lords and their retainers. Your lord, if you have one, is positioned somewhere within the western ranks. You are likely in a unit, surrounded by other soldiers, all pushing forward or holding ground, following orders barked out by officers you may not even know. Your world shrinks to the few feet around you, the enemy directly in front, the comrades at your side, the mud beneath your feet. The fighting is brutal, close quarters chaos. Spears thrust, swords hack, armor clangs. The ground becomes slick with mud and blood. You are fighting not for personal glory, but for survival, for the survival of your unit, for the will of your commander, whoever he may be. Your unconventional speed and ability to read individual opponents might give you an edge in a one-on-one, but here, you're just trying to carve a space for yourself in the melee, defend against attacks coming from multiple directions, and strike down whoever is trying to strike you down. It's like trying to play a sophisticated game of chess while being in the middle of a mosh pit. For hours, the battle rages, a massive, bloody stalemate. The Western Army actually has a numerical advantage, but they are plagued by internal divisions and hesitant commanders. Many lords on the western side are waiting, watching, unsure whether to commit their forces or even considering switching sides. This uncertainty hangs heavy in the air, a silent threat more potent than the enemy's blades. A mainstream historical fact is that the Battle of Sekigahara was heavily influenced by defections and betrayals among the Western Army commanders, most famously Kobayakawa Hideaki. And then it happens. The turning point. Kobayakawa Hideaki, positioned on Mount Matsuo overlooking the battlefield with his large force, makes his move. Ordered by Ieyasu to attack the Western Army, he finally descends the mountain, not to reinforce Mitsunari, but to attack the western flank. This betrayal shatters the Western Army's lines and morale. It's a knife in the back, a sudden, devastating shift that turns a bloody grind into a rout. Suddenly, your side is collapsing. The carefully constructed formations dissolve into panicked flight. Comrades who were fighting beside you moments ago are now running for their lives, or being cut down by former allies. The enemy's confidence surges, and they press their advantage ruthlessly. You are no longer fighting a structured battle, you are caught in a stampede of terror and death. Your focus shifts entirely from winning to escaping. You have to cut your way through the chaos, past fleeing soldiers and pursuing enemies, using every bit of your skill and instinct just to stay one step ahead of oblivion. A quirky tidbit is that some accounts mention the heavy rain and muddy conditions at Sekigahara, which would have made the fighting even more grueling and the subsequent rout a treacherous scramble across slippery terrain. Imagine trying to run for your life in full armor through a muddy field, not exactly ideal cardio conditions. Surviving Sekigahara on the losing side is an achievement in itself. Thousands are killed in the battle, and thousands more are hunted down and executed in the aftermath. You manage to escape the carnage, slipping away in the chaos, blending in with the fleeing remnants or hiding in the surrounding hills. You are not a hero of this battle, you are a survivor. You have seen the true face of war at its largest scale, Not the relatively clean, focused world of dueling, but the indiscriminate, terrifying reality of mass combat where individual skill is often secondary to sheer luck and the strategic blunders of commanders miles away. You emerge from Sekigahara a ronin once more, perhaps even more determinately independent than before. Any potential ties you had to a lord are severed by defeat. You have nothing but your sword, your wits, and the chilling memory of the bloodbath you just endured. You've faced death many times in duels, but Sekigahara showed you death on an industrial scale. It reinforces your pragmatic view of combat. It's not about glory or honor on this level. It's about being on the winning side, or at least, surviving the losing one. This experience, the sheer scale and brutality of Sekigahara, adds another layer to your understanding of conflict. A layer that goes beyond the personal confrontation and touches on the larger forces that shape destiny. You survived the biggest battle Japan had seen in centuries, and now you are truly free, and truly alone, on a path that will lead you to seek mastery not just over others, but over yourself. You have survived Sekigahara. You slipped through the fingers of death and the Tokugawa victors, emerging from the largest, bloodiest battle in centuries not as a celebrated hero. You were on the wrong side, remember? But as a ghost, a nameless ronin among thousands. The world you knew, the one defined by powerful clans and shifting loyalties that culminated in that massive clash, is gone. Tokugawa Ieyasu has won, and a new order is slowly, brutally, being imposed upon Japan. But for you, the wandering continues. Sekigahara didn't give you a home. It just reinforced the fact that your path is a solitary one. The years that follow are a blur of roads, villages, and the constant hum of danger. You are a ronin, a wave man, beholden to no lord, following no banner. This gives you freedom, yes, but it also makes you a target. You have no protection, no stipend, no network. You live by your wits and the edge of your blade. Your reputation, forged in the fires of your early duels and cemented by the destruction of the Yoshioka school, remember them? The guys you basically bankrupted with your sword, precedes you. You are known as a fearsome duelist, unconventional and deadly. And in a world full of samurai looking to make a name for themselves, either by defeating you or hiring you, that makes life complicated. It's like being the only person in town with a really cool, but slightly illegal, hoverboard. Everyone either wants to ride it or report you to the authorities. This period, roughly from the early 1600s until the legendary duel on Gonryo Island, is defined by duels. Lots and lots of duels. Traditional accounts claim you fought over 60 duels in your lifetime, and the vast majority of them happened during these years of wandering. 60 duels. Think about that. That's 60 times you stood across from someone who wanted to kill you, 60 times you stared into the eyes of death and walked away. It wasn't just about proving you were the best, it was about survival. Every challenge accepted was a risk, but every victory was a lesson learned, a refinement of your unique, evolving style. These duels weren't all against famous masters like the Yoshioka. Many were likely against less-known swordsmen, local toughs, disgruntled students from schools you'd insulted, or just people looking for trouble. They happened in fields, by riversides, in temple courtyards, wherever a challenge was issued and accepted. Your opponents would come with their school's techniques, their carefully practiced forms, their traditional weapons, katana, wakizashi, spears, staves. And you would face them with whatever you had, often using a wooden sword, a bakken, perhaps even two swords, or whatever came to hand. A quirky tidbit is that you were known to sometimes use ridiculously oversized or unconventional wooden swords carved from oars or branches, further disrupting your opponent's expectations and making them adapt to your unpredictable reach and weight. Imagine training your whole life to fight someone with a standard sword, and then your opponent shows up with a tree branch the size of a small car. Your training ground wasn't a polished dojo with a sensei giving lessons. Your training ground was the duel itself. Each fight was an experiment, a chance to test a theory, to see what worked and what didn't under the ultimate pressure. You weren't bound by tradition. While others practiced kata, prearranged movements and techniques, you were focused on the fluid, unpredictable reality of combat. You learned to read your opponent's posture, their breathing, the tension in their muscles, not just to predict their next move, but to understand their mental state. Were they confident? Fearful? Overconfident? That psychological edge, that ability to destabilize your opponent's mind before or during the fight, was as crucial as your physical skill. It's like playing poker, but instead of chips, you're betting your life, and you're trying to read their tells while simultaneously setting their sleeve on fire. You were constantly observing the world around you, drawing lessons from everything. The way a farmer used his tools, the movement of an animal, the flow of water, you saw principles of strategy and movement everywhere. This is where your famous two-sword style, Niden Ichiryu, two heavens as one, school, began to develop. While most swordsmen focused on the single katana, you saw the potential of using both the long sword and the short sword simultaneously. It wasn't a traditional approach, it was born from practicality. Why leave one hand idle? Why not use both weapons to defend and attack, to create complex angles and overwhelm an opponent? Historians still argue about when exactly you formalized your two-sword style, some believing it was developed much earlier in your life, while others place its refinement during these wandering years or even later. This period of relentless dueling wasn't just about fighting, it was about refining your philosophy. You were stripping away the unnecessary, the ornamental, the things people did out of tradition or ego. You were focused on effectiveness. What was the quickest, most efficient way to defeat an opponent? What was the essence of combat? It wasn't about looking good or following prescribed forms. It was about winning. This pragmatic, almost brutal simplicity would become the hallmark of your style. You weren't performing, you were executing. You traveled through different provinces, seeing different landscapes, encountering different people and different martial arts schools. Each encounter, whether a duel or just an observation, added to your knowledge. You were a sponge, absorbing lessons from the vast, diverse martial landscape of Japan. You saw the strengths and weaknesses of various styles and incorporated the useful principles into your own unique synthesis. Your style wasn't static. It was constantly evolving, adapting, like a predator refining its hunting techniques. A mainstream historical fact is that during these travels, you are documented as having duels in provinces far from your home, including Kyoto, Izumo, Iga, Edo, modern Tokyo, and others, confirming the extensive nature of your wandering and dueling career before settling down. Life on the road was hard. There was no guarantee of food, shelter, or safety from bandits or vengeful samurai. You learned to be self-sufficient, to rely on your instincts, to be comfortable with solitude. The constant threat sharpened your senses and your reflexes. You couldn't afford to be complacent. Every stranger could be a potential opponent, every shadow a hiding place for an enemy. It was a life lived on the edge, a constant test of endurance and skill. You probably smelled faintly of wood smoke, dust, and sheer determination most of the time. Not exactly ideal cologne for attracting potential employers, but great for deterring casual conversation. Through these countless encounters, you distilled combat down to its essentials: timing, distance, and spirit. You learned that defeating an opponent wasn't just about striking them down. It was about breaking their will, disrupting their rhythm, making them doubt themselves. Your late arrivals to duels, your unconventional weapons, your unpredictable movements, these were all tools to achieve that goal. You were fighting a battle on two fronts, the physical and the psychological. This period of intense, practical experience was foundational. It separated you from the samurai who trained only in dojos, who knew the forms but perhaps lacked the raw, life-or-death experience you accumulated daily. You weren't practicing for a fight, you were fighting to survive. And with each survival, with each victory, your legend grew, and your understanding of the way deepened, moving beyond mere technique towards a more profound philosophy of confrontation and resolution. You were forging not just a fighting style, but a way of life, one duel at a time. And all these duels, all these years of wandering, were building towards one final, defining confrontation. Your years of wandering, those dozens upon dozens of duels fought in dusty fields and quiet clearings, weren't just random acts of violence. They were steps on a path, each victory a stone laid down, building a reputation. You weren't just the kid who killed Arema Kihei anymore. You weren't just the Ronin who humbled the Yoshioka school. You were Miyamoto Musashi, the unconventional, undefeated swordsman, a force of nature that bent the rules of combat to your will. Your name was whispered across Japan, a mixture of awe, fear, and curiosity. And that level of notoriety, in a world obsessed with martial prowess, inevitably attracts attention. Specifically, it attracted the attention of someone who was building his own legend, someone seen as your equal, or perhaps even your superior, by the traditionalists. Enter Sasaki Kojiro. If you were the wild, untamed genius of the sword, Kojiro was the polished, refined master. He was renowned throughout the western provinces, a retainer of the powerful Hosokawa clan, serving under Lord Hosokawa Tadaoki. Kojiro was famous for his technique, the Tsubame Geishi, or swallow cut. Imagine a swift, almost impossibly fast upward cut followed immediately by a downward slash, mimicking the movement of a swallow in flight. It was considered deadly, beautiful, and seemingly uncounterable. Kojiro was associated with the Chujoryu school, a respected lineage, and was likely everything you weren't: well-groomed, formally trained, serving a powerful lord, and possessing a technique that was both elegant and lethal. He was the epitome of the skilled, established samurai swordsman. You were the disruptive innovator. It was a clash waiting to happen, like putting a finely tuned sports car against a souped-up monster truck on a demolition derby track. Both designed for speed, but with vastly different approaches. How exactly did this duel come about? Historians still argue whether the challenge was issued by Kojiro himself, eager to prove his technique against the rising star, or by Lord Hosokawa Tadaoki or his retainer, perhaps seeking to test you, eliminate a potential threat, or simply stage a spectacle between the two most famous swordsmen of the era. What is clear is that the challenge was made, and you accepted. This wasn't just another duel in a field somewhere. This was billed as a clash of titans, a test of competing philosophies and skills that would determine, in the eyes of many, who was truly the greatest swordsman in Japan. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The location chosen for this momentous confrontation was Funajima, a small, uninhabited island off the coast of Bizen province, near what is now Kitakyushu. It was later renamed Ganryu Island, after Kojiro's own school or style. Why an island? To ensure privacy, to control the crowd, or lack thereof, and to make it a definitive, inescapable encounter. There would be no interference, no easy escape. Just you, Kojiro, and the vast, indifferent sea. The date was set for April 13, 1612. As the date approached, the tension would have been immense. Everyone who was anyone in the martial world knew about this duel. Bets were likely placed, reputations hung in the balance. You, being you, probably didn't spend your final days before the duel meditating in a temple or meticulously practicing forms. Your preparation was, as always, unconventional and deeply pragmatic. The night before the duel, you were reportedly staying somewhere on the mainland, perhaps in a fishing village. While Kojiro was likely preparing his mind and body, perhaps polishing his prized sword, the drying pole, Manahoshi Zeo, which was unusually long, a quirky tidbit. It was said to be over 3 shaku, or about 3 feet long, giving him exceptional reach. You were doing something far less traditional. The morning of the duel, you reportedly overslept. Intentionally? Perhaps. Or maybe you just didn't see the need to rush. Your opponent, Kojiro, and the officials overseeing the duel, likely representatives of the Hosokawa clan, were waiting on the island. As they waited, growing increasingly impatient, you were being rowed out in a small boat. And this is where your most famous act of preparation took place. While the boatman rowed you across the water to Ganryu Island, you didn't sit idly. You took one of the boat's oars, a long, heavy piece of wood, and began to carve it with your knife. Chip by chip, you shaped it into a rough-hewn wooden sword, a bakken. You weren't just whittling away time, you were crafting your weapon for the duel. This act is pure Musashi, using whatever is at hand, turning an everyday object into a tool of combat, and simultaneously messing with your opponent's head by arriving late and with an improvised weapon. It's like showing up to a fencing match with a pool noodle and winning. Why carve a wooden sword from an oar? Several reasons, all rooted in your pragmatic genius. First, the length. By making it significantly longer than Kojiro's drying pole sword, you negated his reach advantage. You turned his strength into a potential weakness, forcing him to adjust to an unfamiliar distance. Second, the weight and shape. A solid wooden oar-sword would be heavier and less balanced than a finely crafted bakken, let alone a steel sword. This would disrupt Kojiro's expectations and potentially make his precise, flowing technique less effective against blunt force and unpredictable angles. Third, the psychological impact. Arriving late, looking perhaps disheveled, and armed with nothing but a crude wooden weapon carved minutes before the fight, it screams disrespect, but also supreme confidence. It suggests you don't even need a proper sword to defeat him. It's the ultimate mind game, designed to throw Kojiro off his game before the first blow is struck. As the boat finally approached Gamryo Island, you would have seen Kojiro and the officials waiting. Kojiro, likely dressed impeccably, his long sword gleaming, would have been a picture of poised readiness. You, stepping onto the beach with your rough, oversized wooden sword, would have been the complete opposite, the embodiment of untamed skill and deliberate disrespect for formality. The stage was set. The legendary duel was about to begin. All those years of wandering, all those duels, all that self-taught wisdom, it all came down to this single confrontation on a remote island beach. The sea breeze, the cry of the gulls, the feel of the carved wood in your hand, every sensation sharpened your focus. You were ready. You step onto the sand of Funajima, later to be forever known as Gamryo Island. The sea breeze whips at your rough clothes, the sound of the waves a stark contrast to the silence of the waiting men. Sasaki Kojiro stands there, a figure of striking elegance and deadly grace. He is everything you are not. His hair is neatly tied, his kimono likely spotless, his posture perfect. And in his hand the drying pole, his famously long sword, gleaming in the morning light. He looks every bit the master, the embodiment of refined technique. And you? You are the scruffy Ronin, arriving late, maybe a bit disheveled from the boat ride, carrying a crude, oversized wooden sword carved from an oar moments before. It's like showing up to a black tie gala in muddy work boots, and somehow being the most dangerous person in the room. The officials from the Hosokawa clan are there, witnesses to this historic clash. They look uneasy, perhaps annoyed by your lateness and your blatant disregard for the formality of the occasion. Kojiro himself is likely seething, his initial impatience curdled into cold fury. He probably sees your appearance, your improvised weapon, as a profound insult, a sign that you don't even consider him worthy of facing your best. This is exactly the psychological advantage you sought. You haven't just arrived, you've made an entrance that screams confidence and disrespect, designed to rattle your opponent's carefully constructed composure. The formalities are brief, perhaps non-existent. There are no elaborate bows or lengthy pronouncements. This isn't a ceremony, it's a fight to the death. The air crackles with tension. Kojiro draws his long sword, its length giving him a clear reach advantage, or so he believes. He is ready, his mind focused, his body poised to unleash his legendary Tsubain Geishi, the swallow cut, a technique so fast and complex it's said to be unstoppable. He expects you to engage him at a distance, to try and counter his reach. But you don't fight on his terms. You never do. The moment the signal is given, or perhaps even slightly before, you move. Not with the elegant steps of traditional sword fighting, but with a burst of raw, unbridled speed. You charge him directly, closing the distance before he can fully utilize the length of his sword. Your oversized wooden oar sword is awkward, heavy, but its length unexpected, its impact potentially devastating. Kojiro, reacting to your sudden, unconventional assault, likely initiates his famous technique. The Tsubain Geishi is designed to be a lightning-fast counterattack, catching an opponent off guard with its deceptive upward then downward motion. As his sword begins its deadly arc, you are already there. Your strategy isn't to parry or block in the traditional sense, it's to disrupt his technique, to strike at the precise moment he is committed to his move, at the split second his body or weapon is most vulnerable. Your years of observation, of reading opponents, of fighting with whatever came to hand, have honed your sense of timing and distance to an almost supernatural degree. You've practiced with long weapons, with short weapons, with no weapons. You understand how to use reach, how to negate it, how to exploit the fractions of a second that determine life or death. You meet his attack not with a standard block, but with a direct, powerful strike delivered with your heavy wooden sword. Some accounts say you timed your blow to land just as his upward cut was finishing, catching him as he transitioned to the downward slash. Historians still argue about the precise mechanics of how you countered the Tsubame Geishi, but the outcome is universally accepted. Your strike was faster, better timed, or simply more effective. You strike Kojiro on the head or shoulder. The blow from the heavy oar sword is crushing. It's not the clean cut of a katana, but a brutal impact that shatters bone and ends the fight instantly. Kojiro falls, defeated, likely killed by that single, decisive blow. The duel is over in mere seconds. The legendary Kojiro, the master of the swallow cut, brought down by a ronin with a wooden oar. It's like training for years to fight a master pianist in a classical recital, only for them to show up and win by smashing the piano keys with a baseball bat. Silence descends upon the beach, broken only by the sound of the waves and the cry of the gulls. The officials, the boatmen, anyone present, would have been stunned. This wasn't the drawn-out, dramatic battle of equals they might have expected. It was swift, brutal, and utterly conclusive. You stand over your fallen opponent, the rough wooden sword in your hand, the embodiment of pragmatic victory over refined form. Your victory over Sasaki Kojiro on Ganryu Island on April 13, 1612, is the duel that cements your legend. A mainstream historical fact is that this duel took place and is the most famous event associated with your life, confirming your status as one of Japan's greatest swordsmen. You defeated the perceived rival, eliminating the one man who was widely considered your equal or superior in traditional circles. But this victory is also tinged with the pragmatic brutality that defines you. You didn't win by proving your technique was more beautiful or more complex. You won by being smarter, more adaptable, and completely ruthless in your approach. After the duel, you don't linger. You don't gloat or celebrate. You simply bow to the stunned officials, perhaps a curt, unconventional bow, and return to the boat. You leave the island, leaving behind the body of Kojiro and the shattered expectations of everyone who witnessed the fight. Your departure is as solitary and understated as your arrival was disruptive. You came, you fought, you won, you left. There's a quirky tidbit in some retellings that after striking Kojiro, you paused, perhaps to see if he would recover, and only finished him off when it was clear he was still a threat, or maybe you simply struck once and left, the single blow sufficient. This adds to the mystique and uncertainty surrounding the exact moment of his death, fitting for a figure whose life is so interwoven with legend. Your victory on Ganryu Island marks the peak of your career as a duelist. You have faced the best the traditional world had to offer and defeated him using methods that defied tradition. You are now undeniably the most famous, and arguably the most skilled, swordsman in Japan. But this victory, while validating your unique approach, also signals a turning point. You have proven what you needed to prove in single combat. There is no higher mountain to climb in the world of dueling. The path of the wandering duelist, which you have walked for so long, is reaching its end. You are 28 years old, undefeated, and the most feared man with a sword in the country. What do you do when you've achieved the pinnacle of your chosen path? For you, the answer isn't more duels. It's something deeper, something that moves beyond the simple act of cutting down opponents towards a more profound understanding of strategy and the way. You survived Sekigahara, you dismantled the Yoshioka school, and you defeated the legendary Sasaki Kojiro on Ganryu Island. At 28 years old, you stand at the absolute pinnacle of the dueling world. There is literally no one left to challenge who would significantly enhance your reputation as a pure swordsman. You've faced masters, you've faced armies, you've faced the most hyped opponent of your era, and you walked away, usually leaving your opponent quite significantly less mobile than they were before. So, what do you do when you've conquered the only world you've ever truly inhabited? You could retire to a quiet village, open a small dojo, and teach the next generation your devastating techniques. You could seek service with a powerful lord, leveraging your fame for a comfortable life. But that's not you, is it? You didn't spend 2 decades defying tradition just to settle into a conventional life. The victory over Kojiro is less an ending and more a transition. It's the final exam in the subject of how not to get stabbed in single combat. You passed with flying colors, leaving the examiner, well, let's just say he needed a long lie down. But you realize there's more to conflict, more to mastery, than just one-on-one duels. Sekigahara taught you about the chaos of mass combat. Your duels taught you about the psychology of individual opponents. Now your mind begins to turn towards something larger, something more abstract, the way of strategy. You start to move beyond simply honing your physical techniques, though you never stop practicing. You begin to think about the principles behind combat, the universal truths that apply whether you're facing a single swordsman, leading a unit in battle, or even navigating the complexities of life itself. It's like graduating from learning how to hit a baseball really hard to understanding the physics of the swing, the strategy of the game, and the mental focus required under pressure. You're becoming a theorist as well as a practitioner. This period sees you continue your travels, but perhaps with a different focus. You're still observing, still learning, but now you're looking for deeper patterns. You might spend time in different dojos, not to challenge the master, you've proven that point, but to watch their methods, listen to their teachings, and understand different approaches. You might study other martial arts, spear fighting, archery, even wrestling, looking for common principles of movement, balance, and timing. You're dissecting combat, trying to understand its fundamental building blocks. Your two-sword style, Niden Ichiryu, two heavens as one school, becomes more formalized during this time, or perhaps its theoretical underpinnings are more deeply explored. It wasn't just a gimmick, it was a practical method born from your experience. Using both swords simultaneously wasn't easy. It required incredible ambidexterity, balance, and coordination. But it allowed for a unique range of attacks and defenses, creating openings your opponents weren't trained to handle. You saw the world in terms of duality, long and short, attack and defense, presence and absence, and Niden Ichiryu was the physical manifestation of this understanding. A mainstream historical fact is that you are credited with founding, or at least popularizing the use of two swords simultaneously in Japanese swordsmanship, a stark contrast to the traditional one-sword focus of most schools. But the way of strategy, for you, isn't limited to the battlefield or the dueling ground. You begin to see strategic principles in everyday life. How a craftsman approaches his work, how a merchant conducts business, how water flows around obstacles, how a rock sits unmoved by the wind. These observations feed your understanding. Strategy is about understanding the situation, understanding your opponent, or the challenge, understanding yourself, and finding the most efficient path to victory or resolution. It's about flexibility, adaptability, and seeing the whole picture, not just the immediate confrontation. It's like realizing that the skills you use to win a video game can also help you plan your week effectively or negotiate a better price at the market. Suddenly, life itself becomes a giant strategy game. You might spend time in contemplation, perhaps in nature, reflecting on your experiences. All those duels, all those lives taken or spared, what did they teach you beyond simple technique? They taught you about human nature under pressure, about the importance of timing, about the power of a focused mind. You learn that fear is an opponent, overconfidence is a trap, and rigidity is death. These are not just lessons for the swordsman, they are lessons for life. During this period, you might also begin to interact with people outside the purely martial world. Perhaps you spend time with monks, artists, or scholars, expanding your worldview beyond the narrow focus of combat. These interactions would have challenged your assumptions, exposed you to different ways of thinking, and enriched your understanding of the way, in a broader sense. You start to see that mastery isn't just about physical skill, it's about discipline, focus, and a deep understanding of yourself and the world around you. Historians still argue whether your transition from a relentless duelist to a philosophical strategist was a sudden realization after the Kojiro duel, or a gradual evolution that had been occurring throughout your wandering years. Did defeating Kojiro make you think, okay, done that, what's next? Or were you already moving in this direction, with the Kojiro duel simply being the last major test of your dueling prowess before you fully embraced the strategic path? You aren't just thinking about how to cut down an enemy anymore. You're thinking about how to defeat an enemy without cutting them down, if possible. You're thinking about how to win before the fight even starts, through positioning, psychology, and understanding the context. You're thinking about how to apply the principles of combat to non-combat situations, like managing people or overcoming personal challenges. It's a significant shift, moving from the tactical, how do I defeat this opponent, to the strategic, how do I achieve my objective? This refining of your philosophy isn't happening in a vacuum. Japan is changing. Tokugawa Ieyasu's victory at Sekigahara wasn't the absolute end of conflict, but it ushered in a new era of relative peace and stability. The age of constant civil war is fading, and with it, the role of the wandering duelist becomes less central. Samurai are becoming administrators and bureaucrats as much as warriors. Your own path reflects this larger societal shift, moving from the raw, chaotic violence of the Sengoku period towards a more structured, philosophical approach to conflict that would be relevant even in times of peace. A quirky tidbit from this era might be your continued use of wooden swords, even against opponents who used steel. This wasn't just bravado, it was a practical choice. A wooden sword forced you to focus on timing and impact rather than relying on the cutting power of steel. It also meant that if you defeated an opponent, you could do so without necessarily killing them, which was probably a good idea given your growing fame and the number of people who might have wanted revenge for past defeats or insults. Plus, it just looks cooler, showing up with a big stick and winning. Your reputation is now a double-edged sword, pun intended. It opens some doors, allowing you access to powerful lords and opportunities. But it also makes you a target for anyone seeking to make a name for themselves, or for those still holding grudges. You have to navigate this complex social landscape, which in itself requires strategy. You can't just fight your way through every problem anymore. You have to use your wits, your reputation, and your understanding of human nature. This period of refining the way of strategy is crucial. It's where the raw, instinctive fighter begins to evolve into the profound philosopher whose teachings would resonate for centuries. You are synthesizing your brutal, practical experience with deeper principles, creating a unique and powerful understanding of conflict that transcends the limitations of any single weapon or technique. You are preparing to codify this understanding, to leave behind something more lasting than a trail of defeated opponents. You are preparing to write your legacy, not just in blood on dueling grounds, but in ink on paper. You've conquered the dueling world. You've refined your way of strategy, moving from the brutal practicality of one-on-one combat to the broader principles of conflict. You could, perhaps, have settled down, become a respected teacher, or even taken service with a lord who valued your strategic mind. But Japan isn't quite finished with large-scale conflict yet, and your journey isn't complete without witnessing, and participating in, the final act of the samurai era's great wars. After Sekigahara in 1600, Tokugawa Ieyasu became the de facto ruler of Japan. But there was still one major potential threat: the young heir of the late unifier Toyotomi Hideori, residing in the massive, seemingly impregnable Osaka castle with his mother Yododano and surrounded by a vast number of ronin and lords still loyal to the Toyotomi cause, or simply disgruntled by the new Tokugawa order. This situation was a ticking time bomb. Ieyasu, ever the strategic planner, knew he couldn't establish lasting peace while the Toyotomi heir and his formidable fortress remained a rallying point for dissent. The stage was set for the final major confrontation. How do you, the philosophical ronin, get involved? Historians still argue about the precise reasons for your participation in the Osaka campaigns, with some suggesting you sought service with the Tokugawa line lord to gain status or income after years of wandering, while others propose you were simply drawn to the conflict, seeing it as a final opportunity to test your strategic principles on a grand scale. Regardless of the exact motivation, you find yourself aligning with the Tokugawa side, specifically documented as serving under the Mizuno clan, who were loyal to Ieyasu. This isn't the chaotic free-for-all of Sekigahara. This is joining an established army under a powerful banner. The Osaka campaigns consisted of two major sieges, the Winter Campaign of 1614 and the Summer Campaign of 1615. Osaka Castle was a marvel of 16th-century military engineering, towering stone walls, deep moats, complex gate systems. It was designed to withstand prolonged assault. Fighting here is completely different from dueling on a beach or charging across an open field. This is siege warfare, weeks and months of digging trenches, building fortifications, repelling sallies, enduring bombardments from early cannons, and waiting for openings or moments of weakness. Your individual swordsmanship is still vital in skirmishes and assaults, but survival now depends heavily on discipline, following orders, and the strength of the collective force. It's like swapping your solo performance guitar for a role in a marching band, still musical, but a very different kind of skill set is required. The Winter Campaign was largely a stalemate. The Tokugawa forces, vast in number, surrounded the castle, but the defenses were too strong for a direct assault. The fighting involved skirmishes outside the walls, attempts to fill the moats, and the psychological pressure of being surrounded. You would have been part of this grinding, often tedious process. Imagine days filled with waiting, digging, and the constant, low-level anxiety of being near a massive fortress teeming with enemies. Then, sudden bursts of intense violence during sallies or limited assaults. Your strategic mind would have been working overtime, observing the flow of battle, the effectiveness of different tactics, the strengths and weaknesses of both sides' fortifications and movements. You weren't just a soldier, you were a student of conflict, even in the midst of it. A temporary peace treaty was negotiated after the Winter Campaign, but it was a fragile one, designed by Ieyasu to weaken the castle's defenses by having some outer moats filled in. The peace didn't last. Tensions flared again, leading to the Summer Campaign in 1615. This time, the Tokugawa were determined to end the Toyotomi threat permanently. The fighting was even more intense, culminating in a final, desperate push by the Toyotomi forces outside the castle walls and the eventual storming of the fortress. This is where your skills would have been truly tested in mass combat again. You weren't just defending trenches. You were likely part of the assaulting forces, participating in the bloody, chaotic melees that occurred as samurai and soldiers clashed outside and eventually breached the castle defenses. It's a world of noise, war cries, the crack of early firearms, arquebuses, the thud of arrows, the clang of steel on steel, the screams of the wounded and dying. The smell is gunpowder smoke, blood, sweat, and the churned-up earth. You are fighting shoulder to shoulder with your comrades, relying on them as much as they rely on you. Your two-sword style, honed in duels, would have been adapted for this environment, perhaps using the short sword for defense in close quarters while the long sword was used for offense, or using both to create a mobile, unpredictable defense against multiple attackers. A quirky tidbit is that during the Summer Campaign, one of the most famous clashes was the desperate charge by the legendary Toyotomi general Sanada Yukimura, who reportedly came close to reaching Ieyasu's main camp before being overwhelmed. You might have been fighting in the vicinity, witnessing firsthand the ferocity of these final, desperate stands. You survived the Osaka campaigns. You were part of the Tokugawa victory that finally extinguished the Toyotomi lineage and ushered in over 2 centuries of relative peace under the Tokugawa shogunate. This experience added another dimension to your understanding of conflict. You saw how strategy played out on a massive scale, the logistics of moving and supplying armies, the importance of terrain and fortifications, the psychological impact of siege warfare, the devastating effect of firearms, a technology less prevalent in your earlier duels, and the role of leadership and morale in determining the outcome of battles involving tens of thousands of men. It's like going from playing chess to managing a global logistics company. The principles of planning and resource allocation are similar, but the scale is vastly different, and the consequences of failure are measured in armies, not pawns. Your participation in these campaigns, particularly on the winning side, also offered you something the wandering life never could: potential recognition and patronage from the new ruling power. While you didn't become a famous general, you were part of the final victory, and your reputation as a formidable warrior would have been known to the Mizuno clan and potentially higher up the Tokugawa hierarchy. This might explain your later ability to find service with powerful lords like the Hosokawa. Fighting in the Osaka campaigns wasn't just about survival. It was another crucible where your way of strategy was tested and refined. You saw how individual skill fit into the larger picture, how adaptability was crucial when facing diverse threats, swordsmen, spearmen, archers, gunmen, and how timing and positioning were just as vital when assaulting a wall as they were when facing a single opponent. You emerged from the smoke and chaos of Osaka Castle with a deeper understanding of conflict in all its forms, from the personal duel to the grand siege. The age of constant warfare was ending, but your mastery of strategy was just beginning to fully mature. You survived the fire and blood of the Osaka campaigns. The Toyotomi cause is extinguished, Osaka Castle is a smoldering ruin, and the Tokugawa shogunate's grip on power is absolute. The age of large-scale civil war that defined your youth and early adulthood is effectively over. Japan is entering a period of relative peace, the Edo period, which will last for over 2 centuries. For a man whose life has been defined by conflict, by the sword, by wandering from one battle or duel to the next, this new era presents a fundamental shift. What does a master swordsman do when there are no more major wars to fight and fewer duels to challenge? You could settle into service, perhaps with the Mizuno clan you fought alongside, enjoying the stability and income that a retainer's life offered. But your spirit, forged in independence and a relentless pursuit of mastery, isn't quite ready for quiet retirement or bureaucratic duties. Instead, your focus begins to shift. You've spent decades mastering the physical and psychological aspects of combat. You understand timing, distance, leverage, and the human mind under pressure better than almost anyone alive. But you realize that the way of strategy, the path to true mastery, extends beyond the battlefield and the dueling ground. It encompasses all aspects of life. It's like graduating from being the best athlete in the world to becoming a renowned coach, sports psychologist, and philosopher of movement all rolled into one. You're applying the principles you learned in the crucible of combat to a broader understanding of existence. This is where your artistic and spiritual pursuits begin to blossom. You, the man who killed dozens, perhaps scores, with sword and staff, turn your hand to painting, calligraphy, and contemplation. This might seem like a strange transition, from slicing opponents to delicately wielding a brush. But for you, it's a natural extension of your journey. Art and calligraphy, particularly Zen-influenced sumi-e, ink painting, require intense focus, discipline, and a deep understanding of form and negative space, principles directly applicable to combat. The empty space on a canvas is as important as the brushstrokes, just as the moments between attacks in a duel are as crucial as the attacks themselves. A mainstream historical fact is that you were a skilled practitioner of sumi-e painting and calligraphy, with several authenticated works surviving today. When you approach a blank scroll with brush and ink, it's not just about creating a pretty picture. It's about capturing the essence of the subject with minimal strokes, about expressing your inner state through the movement of your hand. It requires the same single-minded focus you brought to facing Kojiro on Gonryu Island. Every stroke is final. There's no going back, just like in a duel. Your paintings, often of birds like shrikes or cormorants, or of landscapes, are characterized by their stark simplicity, energy, and a raw, untamed quality. They aren't polished or overly refined. They have a directness and power that reflects your martial background. It's like looking at a painting of a bird and thinking, "Yep, that bird looks like it could totally take me in a fight." Your calligraphy is similar, bold, energetic, sometimes almost aggressive strokes that convey immense power and confidence. Writing characters wasn't just about forming words, it was a physical and spiritual exercise. It required proper posture, controlled breathing, and a focused mind, much like preparing for a duel. The brush becomes an extension of your will, just as the sword was. Through these arts, you are exploring the same principles of balance, flow, timing, and decisive action that governed your success in combat, but in a different medium. You also delve deeper into spiritual discipline, likely influenced by Zen Buddhism, which was prevalent among the samurai class. A life filled with violence, with taking lives and constantly facing your own mortality, naturally leads one to contemplate the nature of life, death, and the self. Zen practice, with its emphasis on meditation, mindfulness, and achieving a state of no-mind, mushin, a state of spontaneous, unfettered action free from conscious thought or emotion, aligns perfectly with the peak performance you sought in combat. Mushin is the state where your body reacts instinctively and perfectly to a situation, without hesitation or fear, a state you must have experienced countless times in duels. Zen provided a framework for understanding and cultivating this state not just in fighting, but in all actions. This wasn't about seeking religious salvation in the traditional sense, but about achieving clarity, focus, and an unshakable inner stillness. It was about confronting your own mind, your fears, your ego, just as you confronted opponents with a sword. The discipline required for long hours of meditation or focused artistic practice is just another form of training, a way to hone your mental and spiritual faculties. It's like swapping your heavy armor for a comfy cushion, but the internal struggle is just as intense, arguably more so. Your engagement with art and spirituality wasn't a retreat from your martial past, it was an integration of it. You saw the way of the warrior, Bushido, not just as a code of conduct or a set of fighting techniques, but as a path to self-mastery and enlightenment. Your art wasn't separate from your swordsmanship. It was another expression of the same underlying principles. The economy of line in a sumi-e painting reflected the economy of movement you sought in a duel, no wasted effort, just direct, effective action. The focus required to execute a perfect calligraphic stroke was the same focus needed to deliver a fatal blow. Historians still argue whether your interest in these arts was primarily a means to deepen your martial philosophy, a way to find peace after a violent life, or simply a reflection of the cultural pursuits expected of a refined samurai, even an unconventional one, in this era. Perhaps it was all three. You were certainly not a typical samurai, but you were living in a society where the lines between warrior, artist, and scholar were often blurred, especially at the higher levels. There's a quirky tidbit that suggests you might have even taught your two-sword technique, Niden Ichiryu, through the lens of these artistic and philosophical principles, using calligraphy or painting analogies to explain concepts of timing, distance, and mental state. Imagine trying to learn sword fighting and your teacher is like, "Okay, now channel the spirit of a charging boar through your downward stroke, but make sure the follow-through has the effortless grace of a poorly drawn sparrow." This period of focusing on art, calligraphy, and spiritual insight is crucial for your later work, particularly the Book of Five Rings. You are synthesizing your vast practical experience with a deeper theoretical and philosophical understanding. You are moving from doing the way to understanding the way. You are no longer just a warrior, you are a philosopher warrior, one of the rare individuals who has achieved mastery in both the physical and intellectual realms. You are building the framework for the timeless teachings you will eventually leave behind, lessons drawn not just from defeating opponents, but from contemplating the nature of reality, expressed through the stark beauty of an ink painting or the powerful stroke of a brush. You are preparing to transition from a living legend to an enduring legacy, a process that requires not just a sharp sword, but a clear mind and a steady hand. You survived the Osaka campaigns, emerged from the smoke and chaos of Japan's final great civil war on the winning side, and solidified your reputation not just as a duelist, but as a strategist who understood conflict on multiple levels. The Edo period is dawning, a time of relative peace under the strong hand of the Tokugawa shogunate. The world of constant wandering and life-or-death duels is fading, replaced by a society that values order, administration, and formalized arts. For you, the solitary, unconventional Ronin, this new era presents a unique challenge. How do you, a man forged in the crucible of chaos, find a place in a world striving for stability? Your path eventually leads you to Kumamoto province, in Kyushu, the southernmost of Japan's main islands. It's a place of dramatic volcanic landscapes, fertile plains, and a powerful ruling clan, the Hosokawa. Remember Lord Hosokawa Tadaoki? He was Sasaki Kojiro's patron, the man who likely sanctioned your famous duel on Gonryu Island all those years ago. Life has a funny way of bringing things full circle, doesn't it? You ended the life of his most famous retainer, And now, decades later, you find yourself under the patronage of his family. It's like getting hired by the company whose star employee you famously embarrassed at the annual conference. Awkward, but hey, they clearly respect results. Lord Hosokawa Tadaoki, and later his son and successor Lord Tadatoshi, were not just powerful feudal lords. They were cultured men, deeply interested in martial arts, Zen Buddhism, poetry, and the arts. They were exactly the kind of patrons who would appreciate someone like you, a man who had achieved unparalleled mastery in combat but was also exploring the deeper philosophical and artistic dimensions of the way. Your fame as the undefeated duelist who took down the Yoshioka and Kojiro would have reached their ears, of course. But perhaps it was your evolving reputation as a thinker, a master of strategy in a broader sense, that truly appealed to them in this new era of peace. Your arrival in Kumamoto isn't like taking up a standard samurai retainer position, bound by strict duties and protocols. The nature of your service under the Hosokawa is debated by historians. Historians still argue whether you were a formal, paid retainer with specific duties, or more of an honored guest and advisor, granted lodging and support in exchange for your presence, wisdom, and perhaps occasional instruction. Whatever the exact arrangement, it provided you with something you hadn't had consistently since perhaps your earliest youth, a measure of stability and security. No more sleeping in fields or relying solely on the kindness of strangers or the winnings from duels. You had a place, resources, and the patronage of a powerful lord. This stability allows your philosophical and artistic pursuits to deepen further. You have the time and the mental space to consolidate everything you've learned over a lifetime of intense experience. You continue your practice, perhaps teaching a select few students, but your primary focus isn't on building a large school or propagating a specific lineage in the traditional sense. It's on refining your own understanding and, crucially, preparing to articulate it. Kumamoto, with its castle town and surrounding natural beauty, provides a conducive environment. You might spend time observing the natural world, the flow of the river, the shape of the mountains, seeing in them the same principles of movement, balance, and timing that apply to combat. You continue your sumie painting and calligraphy, using these practices as a form of active meditation, a way to embody the principles of focus and decisive action. Your art from this period would reflect the calm intensity you cultivated, bold strokes, minimalist compositions, capturing the essence of the subject with an economy of line. It's like your paintings are saying, I could totally defeat this bird in a duel, but I choose to capture its essence with ink instead. You are now in your late 50s and early 60s, an elder statesman of the martial world, albeit an unconventional one. You've seen it all, from the chaos of Sengoku warfare to the structured peace of the Edo period, from desperate duels in the countryside to massive sieges. All this experience is coalescing in your mind, forming a coherent philosophy of strategy that applies not just to fighting, but to navigating the complexities of life itself. Your relationship with Lord Tadatoshi seems to have been particularly significant. He was a younger man, eager to learn from your vast experience. He likely provided you with the support and encouragement to finally put your thoughts into writing. He saw the value in your unique perspective, recognizing that your hard-won wisdom, forged outside the confines of traditional schools and formal service, held profound insights. A quirky tidbit is that you were reportedly given a residence near the Kumamoto castle itself for a time, a significant honor that suggests your status was higher than just a mere guest. Imagine having your own place right next to the Lord's castle. Probably came with a killer view, assuming you weren't too busy contemplating the void to notice. The stability in Kumamoto isn't just physical, it's intellectual and spiritual. You are no longer solely focused on immediate survival or proving your prowess. You are focused on understanding the underlying principles of conflict and mastery, on distilling your life's lessons into a form that can be understood by others, or at least, by those willing to look beyond the surface. This period is the culmination of your journey from a wild, self-taught duelist to a profound thinker. You are refining your Niten Ichiryu, not just as a set of techniques, but as a philosophical framework. The two heavens as one isn't just about using two swords, it's about integrating opposing forces, finding balance in duality, seeing the whole picture. It's about using every tool at your disposal, whether physical or mental, to achieve your objective. This is the core of your strategy, and you are preparing to lay it bare. The decades of wandering, the countless duels, the observation of nature and human behavior, the practice of art and meditation, it has all led to this. You are ready to compile your life's work, to articulate the way of strategy that you have lived and breathed. The Hosokawa patronage in Kumamoto provides the necessary environment, peace, support, and perhaps the gentle nudge from a lord who recognized the value of your accumulated wisdom. You are settling in, not to rest on your laurels, but to embark on the final, most enduring project of your extraordinary life. The stage is set, the ink is ready, and the wisdom of the undefeated swordsman is about to flow onto the page. You've found a measure of peace, or at least stability, under the patronage of the Hosokawa lords in Kumamoto. The years of relentless wandering, the constant threat of duels, the chaos of civil war, they are behind you now. You are an elder, your body bearing the scars of 100 fights, your mind sharp and clear, distilled by a lifetime of intense experience. You've achieved mastery in combat, you've refined your understanding of strategy, and you've explored the deeper connections between martial discipline, art, and spiritual insight. But all this knowledge, all this hard-won wisdom, exists primarily within you. It's a lifetime lived, lessons learned through blood and sweat and quiet contemplation. What good is such profound understanding if it vanishes with you? Perhaps it was the encouragement of Lord Tadatoshi, who valued your unique perspective. Perhaps it was a sense of legacy, a desire to leave behind something more enduring than your fearsome reputation. Or perhaps it was simply the natural culmination of your path. Having achieved mastery, the next step is to articulate that mastery, to codify the way you have lived. Whatever the impetus, you decide it is time to write. Not a historical account of your duels, though that would be fascinating, not a simple instruction manual for sword techniques, but a treatise on the way of strategy, drawn from the entirety of your life. For this monumental task, you seek solitude. Not the fleeting solitude of the open road, but a deep, uninterrupted isolation where you can confront your thoughts, organize the sprawling lessons of your life, and commit them to paper. You find the perfect place, Rigando Cave, on Mount Kinpu, just outside Kumamoto. It's a simple, stark cave, little more than a natural rock shelter, but it's secluded, quiet, a world away from the castle town and the distractions of daily life. Imagine swapping your comfy room near the Lord's castle for a damp, rocky hole in the side of a mountain. Definitely not the kind of upgrade most people look for, but for you, it's perfect. It's here, in this Spartan environment, that you will spend the final months of your life, pouring your wisdom onto the page. You settle into the cave, likely with few possessions, a brush, an inkstone, paper or scrolls, perhaps a simple cushion, and certainly your swords. The air is cool, damp, carrying the scent of rock and earth. The only sounds are the rustling of leaves outside, the occasional call of a bird, and the rhythmic scratch of your brush on paper. This is your final dojo, your last battlefield, and the opponent is your own mind. The challenge is organizing a lifetime of chaotic experience into a coherent philosophy. It's like trying to summarize the entire internet using only interpretive dance. Incredibly difficult, but potentially profound if you can pull it off. The book you are writing is Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings. The title itself reflects your understanding of strategy, seeing the whole as composed of distinct but interconnected elements, like the different stances or sections of a battle. You structure the book into 5 rings, each representing a different aspect of strategy, named after the elements: earth, water, fire, wind, and void. The ring of earth lays the foundation, discussing the general principles of strategy, the importance of establishing your way, and the different paths one can follow. It's about understanding the larger context, the terrain, the overall situation, much like understanding the ground you fought on at Sekigahara or the layout of Osaka Castle. The ring of water is about technique, but not just sword techniques. It describes fundamental movements, postures, and the fluid adaptability required in combat. Water can conform to any vessel, flow around any obstacle, or become a crashing wave. This ring embodies your principle of flexibility and seeing things in a balanced, flowing manner, like your Nitin Ichiryu. The Ring of Fire discusses fighting itself, the heat and intensity of battle. It covers timing, rhythm, attacking, and understanding the momentum of a fight. It's the energy and aggression you brought to your duels, the decisive action needed to win. The Ring of Wind delves into understanding other schools and styles. You believed it was crucial to know your opponents, to understand their principles and limitations. This ring critiques other approaches, explaining why your way is distinct and, in your view, superior. It's based on your countless encounters, observing and analyzing different schools across Japan. Finally, the Ring of Void is the most philosophical, describing the state beyond understanding, where strategy becomes intuitive, effortless, and spontaneous. It's the state of motion, of perfect adaptability and presence, where you move without conscious thought, simply being the way. It's the ultimate goal of mastery. As you write, you are not consulting scrolls or notes. Your memory is your library. You are drawing on every duel, every battle, every observation, every moment of contemplation from your 70 years of life. A quirky tidbit is that you reportedly wrote the entire book, or at least dictated it, from memory in a relatively short period, perhaps just a few weeks or months before your death. Imagine trying to write your autobiography from memory, without checking social media or old photos. You'd probably forget half the embarrassing stuff, which might be for the best. The process is intense. You are not just recounting events, you are extracting the universal principles embedded within them. You are translating the raw, visceral experience of life or death combat into abstract concepts that can be applied to any challenge. It requires immense focus, discipline, and a ruthless clarity of thought. You are stripping away the non-essentials, getting to the core of what it means to effectively confront and overcome obstacles. Who is this book for? Historians still argue about the intended audience or purpose of the Book of Five Rings. Was it primarily for Lord Tadatoshi, a gift of your accumulated wisdom? Was it intended for your students, a text to guide their training? Or was it primarily for yourself, a final act of self-reflection and consolidation of your way before facing the ultimate void? Perhaps it was all of these things, or perhaps it was simply a natural outpouring of a lifetime dedicated to understanding mastery. Regardless of the intended audience, the book is a testament to your life. It reflects your unconventional nature, direct, pragmatic, and unburdened by tradition. Your writing style is plain, sometimes abrupt, focused on conveying meaning efficiently rather than being flowery or academic. It mirrors your fighting style, no wasted movements, just direct, powerful strikes aimed at the core of the matter. Writing in the cave, surrounded by silence and the weight of your own history, is a profound experience. Each stroke of the brush is a connection to a past duel, a long march, a moment of insight gained under a foreign sky. You are literally inscribing your life onto the page, transforming personal experience into universal wisdom. It's like taking every mistake you ever made and turning them into a best-selling self-help book. A mainstream historical fact is that you completed the Book of Five Rings in the spring of 1645, just weeks before your death, dedicating it to your patron, Lord Hosokawa Tadatoshi. This timing underscores its status as your final, definitive statement on your philosophy. You are not just writing a book, you are performing a final, intense act of self-mastery. You are demonstrating the principles you espouse, focus, discipline, clarity, in the very act of articulating them. The cave is not just a writing retreat, it's a crucible where your life's philosophy is forged into a tangible form, ready to be shared with the world, ensuring that the way of Miyamoto Musashi will endure long after the swords are sheathed and the battles are over. You are in Ryugando Cave, the air cool and damp, the sounds of the outside world muffled. The task before you is immense, condensing a lifetime of brutal experience, profound observation, and deep contemplation into words. It's like trying to fit a hurricane into a teacup, or explaining the internet to someone who thinks the printing press is cutting-edge technology. But you are Musashi, and you are focused. With brush and ink, you begin to write Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings. This isn't just your story, it's your philosophy laid bare. You structure the book, as you conceived it, into 5 rings, like the elements that compose the world, or perhaps the sections of a battle formation. Each ring represents a different facet of the way of strategy, building upon the last, moving from the tangible to the intangible. The first is the Ring of Earth. This is the foundation, the ground upon which all strategy is built. You talk about understanding the way itself, the importance of finding your own path, and the general principles that apply to any form of conflict. It's about seeing the big picture, understanding the terrain, literal or metaphorical, and establishing a strong base before you even think about engaging. You emphasize the importance of having a clear mind and a determined spirit. Think of it as the bedrock of your entire approach. If the foundation isn't solid, everything else crumbles. You lay out the differences between various paths in life, urging the reader to commit fully to their chosen way, just as you committed to the way of strategy with your swords. Next, the Ring of Water. Water is fluid, adaptable, constantly changing form yet always the same essence. This ring discusses technique, but not just rigid forms. It's about movement, timing, and the ability to adjust instantly to any situation. You describe fundamental stances, grips, and cuts, but always with the emphasis on flexibility. Water can be a gentle stream or a raging torrent. It can flow around obstacles or wear away stone. Your style, Nidan Ichiryu, is like water, constantly moving, adapting, using both swords in a fluid, unpredictable way. You talk about the rhythm of combat, the importance of breaking your opponent's rhythm, and finding your own tempo. It's about being like water, formless and powerful, able to flow into any opening and overwhelm your opponent before they know what's happening. Then comes the Ring of Fire. Fire is the heat of battle, the intensity of the fight itself. This ring is about engagement, about how to fight effectively once combat has begun. You discuss attacking, seizing the initiative, and maintaining momentum. It's about understanding the psychology of the fight, the fear, the aggression, and how to use them to your advantage. You talk about different tactics for engaging opponents, how to press an advantage, and how to turn a defensive situation into an offensive one. Fire is decisive, consuming, and powerful. This ring is where you describe the moments of intense action, the split-second decisions that determine victory or defeat, the kind of moments you live through hundreds of times in duels and battles. It's about bringing the heat, literally and figuratively. Following fire is the Ring of Wind. Wind is invisible, but its effects are everywhere. This ring is about understanding others, particularly other schools and styles of martial arts. You believed it was essential to know your enemy, to understand their principles, their strengths, and their weaknesses. You critique the limitations of other schools, those focused too much on superficial techniques, or who were rigid and inflexible. This ring is a reflection of your years of wandering and challenging various masters. You didn't just defeat them physically, you dissected their methods mentally. You explain why your way, forged in real-world experience and unburdened by rigid tradition, is superior. It's like writing a scathing review of every other restaurant in town after you've just opened the best one. Finally, the Ring of Void. This is the most abstract, the most philosophical ring. The void is nothingness, but it is also everythingness, the source from which all things arise. This ring is about reaching the highest level of mastery, a state of effortless, intuitive action. It's the state of mushin, of no mind, where technique becomes second nature, and your actions are spontaneous and perfectly adapted to the situation without conscious thought. It's about transcending technique itself and simply being the way. You describe this state as seeing what cannot be seen, understanding what cannot be understood through conventional thought. It's the ultimate freedom from fear, doubt, and attachment. Reaching the void isn't about emptiness in a negative sense. It's about being completely present, completely receptive, and acting from a place of pure, unfettered potential. It's like becoming so good at something you don't even have to think about it anymore. You just do it perfectly, every single time. As you write, the lessons flow from your brush. You talk about timing, not just the timing of a strike, but the timing of life, knowing when to act and when to wait. You discuss the importance of seeing things from different perspectives, both your own and your opponent's. You write about the difference between genuine training and mere posturing. You emphasize the importance of cutting through unnecessary thoughts and actions, focusing only on what is essential. Your words are direct, pragmatic, sometimes blunt, reflecting the no-nonsense approach you took to combat and to life. You dedicate the book to Lord Hosokawa Tadatoshi, your patron, who provided you with the peace and security needed to undertake this task. A mainstream historical fact is that you completed and presented the Book of Five Rings to Lord Tadatoshi in the spring of 1645, shortly before your death. This act ensures that your accumulated wisdom would be preserved and shared, a legacy far more enduring than any single duel or battle. There's a quirky tidbit that suggests there are multiple versions of the Book of Five Rings that have been passed down, with slight variations in wording or content, possibly due to being copied by hand over generations or perhaps reflecting different stages of your thought process. This adds another layer of mystery to the text, making each version a unique window into your mind. Historians still argue about the intended audience, or primary purpose of the Book of Five Rings. Was it a personal reflection? A manual for your immediate students? A gift for your lord? Or a universal guide to strategy for anyone seeking mastery in any field? The ambiguity is part of its enduring appeal. It speaks to different people in different ways, its principles applicable far beyond the samurai world. Writing this book is your final battle, a confrontation with the formless challenge of articulating the ineffable. You are fighting against the limitations of language, trying to capture the essence of a lifetime lived on the edge of existence. Every stroke of the brush is infused with the energy of those countless duels, the chaos of Sekigahara and Osaka, the quiet contemplation in nature, the discipline of art and meditation. You are pouring your very being onto the page. The cave is your world now, a sanctuary of thought and memory. You are nearing the end of your journey, both in writing the book and in life. But you are not focused on the end. You are focused on the task at hand, on capturing the truth as you see it, on leaving behind a guide for those who seek true mastery. The Book of Five Rings is not just a book about swordsmanship, it is a book about strategy, about perception, about discipline, and ultimately, about living a life of purpose and clarity. It is your final, powerful statement on the way, a legacy carved not into stone, but into the minds of those who will read your words for centuries to come. You are in Ryagando Cave, the scratch of your brush on paper the dominant sound in the stillness. The Book of Five Rings is nearing completion. Every stroke is a distillation of a lifetime, the chill of that first duel at 13, the roar of Sekigahara, the spray of the sea on Gonri Island, the quiet discipline of painting, the stillness of meditation. It's all flowing out of you, organized into the structure of the Five Rings, a final testament to the way you have lived. Your body is old now, worn down by 70 years of hard travel, countless fights, injuries, and the relentless demands you've placed upon it. The dampness of the cave probably doesn't help the aches and pains that have accumulated over the decades. You are approaching the end of your path, and you know it. But your focus is not on death, it is on completing this task, on leaving behind the wisdom you have gained. This book is your final act of creation, born from a life of destruction. It's like spending your whole career building bombs and then deciding your last project is the world's most comfortable blanket. A surprising pivot, but maybe just what you needed. You finish the writing. The last character is drawn, the ink dries. Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings, is complete. A mainstream historical fact is that you finished the book and presented it to your patron, Lord Hosokawa Tadatoshi, in the spring of 1645. You dictated it to him, or perhaps to a scribe on his behalf, a final gift of your accumulated knowledge to the Lord who had given you peace and stability in your final years. This ensures your words will live on, escaping the confines of the cave and your own mortality. After completing the book, your time in the cave is short. Your health is failing rapidly. Some accounts suggest you left the cave shortly after finishing the manuscript, perhaps moving to a residence provided by Lord Tadatoshi to spend your final days in slightly more comfort, surrounded by your few possessions and maybe a trusted attendant or two. Historians still argue whether you died in the cave itself or were moved to a residence shortly before your death, adding another layer to the mystery of your final moments. Regardless of the exact location, the end comes soon after. You face it with the same clarity and focus you brought to every duel. Death, after all, is the ultimate opponent, the final void you must confront. You spent a lifetime preparing for confrontation, learning to face fear, to maintain composure under pressure, to understand the nature of impermanence. These lessons, honed on the battlefield and in quiet contemplation, serve you now. A quirky tidbit suggests that you died sitting upright, perhaps in a formal posture, with your swords beside you, facing in a specific direction. Whether literally true or a symbolic embellishment, it reflects the image of you as a warrior master, facing death with unwavering discipline and readiness, embodying the principles of your way even in your final breath. No lying weakly in bed for you. You were apparently ready to take on the Grim Reaper in a sitting duel if necessary. Probably still with a wooden sword carved from a nearby chair leg, just to keep him on his toes. You pass away around June 13th, 1645, at the age of about 62. Your life, a torrent of violence, wandering, and relentless self-mastery, comes to a quiet end in Kumamoto. You are buried according to your wishes, perhaps near the road, so you could continue to watch the world, or perhaps in a more formal samurai burial site. The exact details, like so much of your life, are colored by legend. Your immediate legacy is complex. To some, you are the undefeated sword saint, the man who killed Sasaki Kojiro and brought down the Yoshioka school. To others, you are a wild, unconventional figure who defied the norms of samurai society. But your enduring legacy, the one that resonates centuries later, is the Book of Five Rings. That simple treatise, written in a cave by a man who lived and breathed conflict, becomes a timeless classic. It's not just for swordsmen. Its principles of strategy, timing, perception, and discipline are applicable to business, sports, art, and navigating the challenges of modern life. People read it not just to understand samurai swordsmanship, but to understand how to face obstacles, how to make decisions under pressure, how to find clarity in chaos. Your words, born from the brutal reality of Sengoku Japan, proved to be universally relevant. It's like finding out that the guy who invented wrestling holds also wrote the definitive guide to effective project management. Unexpected, but incredibly useful. Through the Book of Five Rings, you continue to teach. You are not just a historical figure. You are a voice offering hard-won wisdom from a life lived fully on the edge. You became the legend by living the way, and you ensured the legend would endure by writing it down. Your final act was not a duel, but an act of profound creation, transforming the chaos of your life into a guiding philosophy for future generations. And so, your journey ends. From the hazy origins in Harima, through the blood and dust of countless duels and battles, to the quiet contemplation of art and spirituality, culminating in the stark solitude of a cave where you penned your final, enduring legacy. You were Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated, the unconventional, the master strategist. Your life was a relentless pursuit of mastery, a testament to the power of discipline, observation, and an unyielding will to follow your own way. Your swords are silent now, but your words echo through the centuries, guiding those who seek their own path to mastery, whatever their chosen field may be. The journey through your life, Miyamoto Musashi, is now complete. We've walked the dusty roads you traveled, felt the tension of the duels you fought, witnessed the chaos of the battles you survived, and sat with you in the quiet solitude of the cave where you wrote your enduring wisdom. It was a life lived on the edge, a life that defied convention and pursued mastery with an intensity rarely seen. Now, as the echoes of swords and strategy fade, and the images of ancient Japan soften around the edges, allow yourself to drift. The lessons you've absorbed from this journey, the insights into focus, discipline, and facing challenges head-on, can settle into your mind. There's no need to hold on to the tension. The fight is over. Just breathe deeply, and let the quiet stillness of the night wash over you. Allow the images to become gentle, like the soft mist over a peaceful valley. Your mind is clear, your body is relaxed. There is only the quiet hum, the gentle breeze, and the path leading you deeper into rest.